He was a single father named Aaron Cole, though the name felt thin and forgettable in a city of millions. His mornings began before the sun, with the soft weight of a sleeping child pressed into his shoulder and the smell of instant coffee burning because he forgot it on the stove again. His son, Noah, was 7 and carried the kind of bravery children develop when they learn too early that adults sometimes fall apart. They lived in a small apartment with walls that whispered every neighbor's argument and joy, where the heater rattled like it might give up any day. Aaron had practiced the interview answers while tying Noah's shoes, had smoothed his one good shirt while reminding his son to finish breakfast. He had promised nothing, but hope had crept in anyway, settling into his chest like a dare. The building where the interview took place rose above the street like a polished monument to success. Inside, everything smelled clean and expensive. Aaron had sat across from a panel that smiled politely and asked careful questions, their eyes flicking to the gaps in his resume like birds spotting crumbs. He explained the years lost to hospital rooms and night shifts, to learning how to be both mother and father after grief rearranged his life. He spoke plainly, without excuses, because he had learned that desperation could sound like dishonesty. When it ended, there were nods and a thank you, and then the familiar weight of knowing before anyone said it. By the time he reached the lobby, the job was already gone. He walked away because that was what he had learned to do. He walked away because there was a bus to catch and a child to pick up from school, because hope was expensive and he had bills waiting. Outside, the wind tugged at his coat, and the city swallowed him whole. He did not see the glass doors swing open again. He did not hear the echo of footsteps behind him, urgent and out of place among the polished calm of the building. Upstairs, in a corner office with windows that cut the skyline into something almost gentle, the billionaire CEO of the company had watched the interview through a private feed. Malcolm Reed had built his empire on instinct sharpened by failure, and something about Aaron's quiet resignation had cut through the noise of polished answers and rehearsed confidence. It was not the words, it was the way Aaron gathered his papers like they mattered, the way he nodded as if grateful for the chance even when it had not gone his way. Malcolm felt a tug of recognition, a memory of walking away from rooms that decided his worth without knowing his story. Before the board could move on to the next candidate, Malcolm stood, a sudden urgency threading his steps as he headed for the elevator. Aaron reached the curb just as the light turned red, the city pausing in a breathless moment of metal in motion. That was when a voice cut through the noise, calling not his name, because it had not mattered enough to remember, but calling him back all the same. He turned, startled, and saw a man in a tailored suit moving toward him with a look that did not belong on faces like that. There was no applause, no cinematic freeze, just two lives colliding at the edge of a crosswalk. Malcolm did not offer promises. He asked for a moment. He asked for the truth. They stood there while the city flowed around them, and Aaron spoke because something in the other man's eyes invited honesty instead of performance. He spoke of nights counting change on the kitchen table, of learning to cook and braid hair and sit still in waiting rooms. He spoke of wanting stability more than success, of wanting to be home in time to help with homework. He did not ask for pity. He asked to be seen. The decision that followed did not feel like charity. Malcolm did not tear up or offer speeches about fate. He offered a second interview, this time without a panel, without the armor of formality. He offered it because something in Aaron's story matched the values he claimed to build his company on, values that too often gathered dust behind mission statements. They shook hands, and when Aaron walked away this time, his steps felt different, not lighter, but steadier, as if the ground had remembered how to hold him. The days that followed were an exercise in patience. Aaron returned to his routines, to packed lunches and bus rides, to the small acts of care that filled his life with meaning even when money did not. When the call came, it did not announce miracles. It offered a role that fit his skills and respected his limits, a schedule that allowed him to be present for the small, sacred moments of fatherhood. It offered dignity. Aaron accepted with a gratitude that settled into resolve. Work was not a fairy tale. The learning curve was steep, the expectations high. There were nights he fell asleep over spreadsheets and mornings he woke before the alarm, heart racing with the fear of failing again. But there was also support, mentorship, and a culture that made room for humanity. Malcolm checked in, not as a savior but as a leader who understood that people were more than the sum of their outputs. He watched as Aaron grew into the role, not by becoming someone else but by becoming more fully himself. At home, the changes were subtle at first. A repaired heater. Groceries bought without counting every coin. A backpack replaced before the zipper broke. Noah noticed the difference in the way children do, through the easing of tension in the air. Evenings stretched longer, filled with homework and laughter, with the simple luxury of not rushing toward the next crisis. Aaron learned that stability could feel like joy, that security could be a quiet room and a child asleep without worry. Months passed, and the story of the man who had walked away from an interview only to be called back began to ripple through the company. It became a shorthand for something employees wanted to believe about where they worked. But for Aaron, it remained personal and grounded, a reminder that being seen could change a life. He did not forget the lobby, the cold marble, the way hope had slipped. He carried it with him as a compass, guiding how he treated others, how he listened. The day Malcolm invited Aaron to speak at a company gathering, there was no stage lighting, no dramatic reveal. Aaron spoke about resilience without turning it into a trophy. He spoke about systems that fail people and people who keep going anyway. He spoke about the cost of asking for help and the courage it takes to offer it. The room listened, not because the story was rare, but because it was familiar in ways many had tried to forget. Years later, the city would keep moving, as cities do. The building would remain tall and polished. Interviews would continue to end with polite smiles and careful rejections. But somewhere in that flow, a thread had been woven, a reminder that sometimes the most important decisions happen after the door closes, in the moments when someone chooses to run instead of letting another person disappear.